외신기자 여러분 안녕하십니까?
Members of the Foreign
저는
Press,
4차
good morning. I am
산업혁명위원회
Chang Ali, Director of Operations Support Team at PCFIR Secretariat. We will now begin the FPC Korea Policy Forum with the PCFIR Chairperson Sungroh Yoon. The Policy Forum is jointly organized by the Presidential Committee on the Fourth Industrial Revolution and the Korean Culture and Information Service to explain to and discuss with the foreign press and the governments concerning major Korean government policies. The forum will be streamed live through KTV Arirang and PCFIR YouTube channel. Complying with the safety measures, we have only invited 16 journalists to the venue in the order that they signed up. Those journalists who could not join us physically are welcome to post your questions using the online messenger. The director of COSIS, Mr. Park Jong-yeol, will kick things off with an opening remark, followed by the opening remark by the chairperson of the PCFIR, and then we'll listen to the presentation by the data policy planner officer, after which we will have a Q&A. We are also joined by the 3 civilian members of the PCFIR. We have Mr. Seongjun Kim, CEO of Lendit Corp, and Ms. Myung-soon Park, head of the AIBU at SK Telecom, and we have Mr. Dong-gyu Lee, Chief Relations Officer of Kakao Mobility Corp. I'd like to invite Director Park Jong-yeol of COSIS for his opening remark. He graduated from Seoul National University with a bachelor's degree in philosophy. He got his master's degree in policy studies at Duke University. He has worked in the Office of the President, the Korean Embassy in the U.S., and in the Ministry of Culture's Public Relations.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Jong-yeol Park, Director of Korean Culture and Information Service. It is very meaningful that we're holding the second FPC Korea Policy Forum this year, where the key policymakers are invited to have discussions with the foreign press on various policy issues. We had the first policy forum with Prime Minister earlier. Today, we have Chairperson Sungroh Yoon of the Presidential Committee on the Fourth Industrial Revolution, who's developing national policy on data to ensure that the Fourth Industrial Revolution will benefit lives of the Korean citizens. I'd like to thank Chairperson Yoon, foreign press, and staff members of the committee for joining us. Recently, Korea has gained global recognition with K-epidemic control and new Korean wave, and the world is showing keen interest in Korea. Recently, several American media companies have chosen Seoul as their global hub. In line with this, the government has increased opportunities to better communicate with the foreign media outlets regarding government policies. And thus, various programs have been initiated. For instance, since March this year, the Prime Minister has been holding a weekly regular briefing every Thursday, which is open to all journalists, including the foreign press. Government agencies such as the Central Disease Control Headquarters and the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency have added extra time for Q&As with foreign media. And the FPC Korea Policy Forum that we've been organizing has the same objective. Going forward, we plan to provide more opportunities where policymakers and the foreign press can engage in discussions on various policy topics such as Korean New Deals, economy, industry, environment, and energy. And also to support the foreign press better for their reporting activities, we will expand the Foreign Press Center right here and improve its facilities in the second half of this year. There will be spaces for video conferencing, video production and editing, interview rooms, lounge, and 5G network support. I hope that you will actively use these facilities. Once again, I'd like to thank Chairperson Yoon and the staff members of the PCFIR as well as the members of the foreign press. Thank you. Thank you very much, Director Park Jong-yeol of COSIS. Before I invite Chairperson Yoon for his opening remarks, let me introduce him to you. He's an AI expert who will promote the Fourth Industrial Revolution in Korea. He serves as the joint chairperson together with Prime Minister Chung Se-kyun. He studied electrical and information engineering at SNU and received an MA and PhD in electrical engineering from Stanford University. He's professor at SNU. Please welcome Chairperson Yoon.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Sungroh Yoon, co-chairperson of the Presidential Committee on the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Prime Minister Hyeon Jung is the joint chairperson. It is my great pleasure to hold the first policy forum with foreign correspondents in Korea. I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to Jeong-yeol Park, Director of Korean Culture and Information Service, Muson Kim, President of the Seoul Foreign Correspondents Club, and correspondents of the foreign press who joined today's event. This committee is a government advisory body based on a public-private partnership to accelerate digital transformation by deliberating upon and coordinating government-wide policies related to the future technologies and related issues. The committee consists of approximately 40 members, including 20 civilian members and 12 ministers, including the Minister of Science and ICT, the Minister of Economy and Finance, and the Minister of Trade, Industry and Energy, as well as the Presidential Science and Technology Advisor. As of now, the committee has developed national strategies in response to the Fourth Industrial Revolution and deliberated upon and approved strategies in the key areas of digital transformation, such as data, networks, and AI. In addition, the committee supported Korea in commercializing 5G services, the first in the world, and pursuing national AI strategies and the Korean New Deal project, thus contributing to making the country as a global innovation leader. We are experiencing part of a new world or new future that has arrived earlier than expected due to the unprecedented global situation caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. We will be able to return to our normal life thanks to the dissemination of vaccines and medicine. However, we will have to brace ourselves better for the upcoming future based upon the lessons learned from COVID-19. In particular, now is the time to prepare for the back to the better future by accelerating the transition to a data-based digital economy. For this, the Korean government is implementing the Digital New Deal project to transform the country into an advanced economy by utilizing Korea's superior ICT technologies in all industries. In addition, various kinds of data are already being collected and used in several areas, including the financial and medical sectors. It is essential to provide systematic support through integrated governance covering both the public and private sectors to help people utilize collected data in a more worthwhile manner, use services more safely and conveniently, and strengthen their data sovereignty. This crucial role will be taken by this committee, and I feel an extra responsibility as the joint chairperson from the private sector. The next 5 years will be a crucial inflection point in digital transformation, where technological developments will become a reality. Unlike the past, Korea is at a starting point similar to advanced countries. But our future relies on how we utilize data and AI. Helping the private sector strengthen and make use of capabilities is the foremost in ensuring that data and AI are used in a worthwhile manner. The Korea Data 119 project, which will be announced today, will show the direction of Korea's data policies. The committee selected key tasks that are the result of continuous discussions with and coordination of different ministries, agencies, and stakeholders, after gathering opinions of the private sector approximately 50 times. The committee will do its part as Korea's data control tower by leading cooperation among government ministries as well as a private-public partnership. In addition, the committee will further solidify a partnership with international society. The committee will actively communicate with foreign ambassadors in Korea and foreign ministers and share policies and success cases by holding international conferences. Although our time together today is brief, I would like to have frank conversations with you regarding Korea's innovative technologies and data policies. We look forward to your interest and active participation in today's meeting. Thank you.
네, 위원장님 감사합니다.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. And now I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Il-kwon Bae. He received his bachelor's degree in sociology from SNU, and he got his MA in public administration from Syracuse University. He was in charge of public data policies and government innovation planning at the Ministry of Interior and Safety and was appointed Data Policy Planning Officer in February. Please go ahead, Mr. Bae.
I'm Il-kwon Bae, Data Policy Planning Officer of Secretary of Presidential Committee on the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Today, I will give an account of the Korea Data 119 project, National Data Policy Direction. The Korean government has digitalized major national resources through an administration network, national database, and e-government project since 1980s. And actively work on making public data open in line with the global open data trend. In addition, the government has continuously pursued convergence project combining data and artificial intelligence, as well as various projects in order to foster big data industry. The current administration laid the groundwork to vitalize the digital economy by revising 3 major acts related to data and announcing the Digital New Deal project and national AI strategies. Thanks to this effort, big data has been accumulated and opened. Several database services were developed and new AI and data-based companies have emerged. Then, are we creating value from the data? I think we have a long way to go until we can answer yes. The private sector still needs more quality data. The government's policies are supplier-oriented, and dispersed data governance has also led to inefficiency. Due to these limitations, Korean industries are still in the early stage of utilizing data. With this in mind, the committee developed Korea Data 119 project with private sector to innovate the overall data ecosystem. The Korea Data 119 project aims to vitalize the digital economy with data under the vision of making Korea the country where data is the most safely and effectively used. For this, the project will basically focus on innovating the data ecosystem to make it company and market-oriented for digital digital transformation of entire industry, and encouraging public participation with a focus on people and services, and establish a government-wide support structure through integrated governance. The Korea Data 119 project consists of 11 tasks to solve long-standing issues identified by the private sector and 9 services that give the public first-hand knowledge of the benefits of data. First, let me explain the 11 tasks. 1. We will immediately make available key data from the National Tax Service, the National Health Insurance Service, and the Health Insurance Review and Assessment Service through feasible options such as data retrieval services, data safe zone, pseudonymization, and my data. 2. We will enhance the quality of data as requested by users by standardizing the data, supplying data regularly, and preventing data omissions. 3. We will provide support to encourage government sector to utilize specialized private company in processing and analyzing data. The government will also take the lead in purchasing data from the private sector to create a data market. 4. We will bring together current dispersed data transaction platforms with an integrated data map so that anyone can easily search and use data. We will also make UI and UX more convenient. 5. In the long term, we will get a nationwide overview of data and develop strategies to utilize it. Also, we will create the position of Chief Data Officer, CDO, in each of government ministries and agencies, as well as state organizations. CDOs will be in charge of data collection, opening data, and utilization. 6. We will drastically improve government data collection method to ensure that the public only submits data once to avoid any inconvenience. We will introduce a system of pre-planning data for informatization project. At the same time, we will improve training programs for civil servants to reinforce their capabilities for using data. 7. We will establish an institutional foothold so that new data utilization system can take root early on. The right to data portability will be established to allow the My Data system to take root, thus reinforcing the public's data sovereignty. We will define operator selection criteria and data collection method needed for My Data operate to conduct business in various fields. The public sector will present various example cases to remove uncertainty related to pseudonymization. In addition, we will improve necessary systems to ensure the safe use of private information and public data. Next, we will start considering measures for data risk management risk management system to proactively diagnose and respond to risk related to the opening and utilization of data. 9. A data-based disaster management system will be established to rapidly identify and support victims from disaster, such as infectious diseases, earthquakes, and fires. We will rapidly respond to current issues, including COVID-19. Firstly, we will record and analyze the changes in social phenomena caused by the pandemic by preserving the 4 years 2019, 2020, and 2021, and lay down a foundation to rapidly respond to similar situations in the future, if any. Also, we need science-based response to damage from annual floods. Hydrologic data are currently dispersed across several entities, including Ministry of Environment, local government, and the Ministry of Interior and Safety. We will systematically integrate these data and utilize them to prevent water-related disasters and improve the water environment. Next, let me explain 9 public services with tangible effect that the public can directly experience. 1. We will start providing My Data services in the medical field to allow citizens to use apps to conveniently check their personal health records that are currently stored at different institutions. 2. We will provide insurance company with medical records to simplify the process for private health insurance claims. 3. We will analyze consumption patterns from data of shopping orders to provide individuals with services to improve consumption activities. 4. We will apply AI technology to custom clearance data to detect counterfeit products. 5. The meal support program for children suffering from food insecurity combines local government meal support data and private food delivery services. 6. We will also provide elementary and middle school students with AI-based customized learning assistance services to resolve the widening education gap due to the pandemic. 7. We will provide a large volume of voice and natural language data that can help understand the sentiment of Korean people. 8. We will secure and provide data of world-class Korea images and video. 9. Last but not least, we will support improving the efficiency of import and export logistics process by combining the public and private data of ports. If the Korea Data 119 project succeeds, individuals can enjoy a more convenient life thanks to various data-related services. A company can increase their competitiveness by creating new values. And the government will be able to provide the public with better service. That brings us to the end of presentation. Thank you.
네, 국장님 감사합니다.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bae, for your presentation. Now we will have a Q&A session. We will receive questions from the floor as well as questions submitted via the online messenger. If you have any questions, please raise your hand. When you're called upon, please mention your affiliation and your name and then pose a question. Are there any questions? While you prepare your questions, let me address the questions submitted in advance through online. So at the PCFIR, there are 20 members from the private sector. And on behalf of the private sector members, we have 3 of them here. Let me introduce them. First of all, we have CEO Kim Sung-jun from Lendit. He used to be a designer and now an entrepreneur. Next is Ms. Park Myung-soon, She's the head of AI business unit at SK Telecom, an ICT expert leading business model development of AI. We also have Mr. Dong-gyu Lee from Kakao Mobility Corp. I'd like to ask a question to all three of them. At PCFIR, there is a strong emphasis on the private and public partnership in addressing various policies. So I'd like to ask you about your overall experience in participating in the PCFIR. I would also like to ask you for your opinions on the impact of the data policy that was announced today. Who will go first? First of all, I would like to mention that the Presidential Committee on the Fourth Industrial Revolution has been working on reviewing and discussing these important policies, and I believe that this committee is a very rare and excellent example in promoting public-private partnership. I'm working in the private sector, developing new initiatives and new ideas. When I think about 6 years ago when I started my business and what it is now, when there is a problem, and when you try to develop a new business, you may run into regulatory limitations. In the past, 6 years ago, when I had such problems, I didn't know who to talk to. I didn't know how to start to try to overcome these regulatory limitations. But now we have this committee that serves as a communication channel between the public sector and the private sector. Problems may not be resolved right away, but it is indeed very meaningful that we have this channel of communication where members of the private sector can talk to the public sector regarding any issues that they're experiencing. So I believe that this is a very important milestone. The goal of the committee is not only a short term, but also in the medium and long term. This committee will continue to work on developing directions for the country so that we can have sustainable development and growth. So at this committee, we have been engaged in various discussions. Thank you.
Ms. Myung-soon Park. I have been working in SK Telecom for 20 years. Within SK Telecom, I've been in charge of technology development and the business development side as well. In the companies, data has been utilized as an asset for 10 years or even 20 years. But it's only recent that data has been considered as part of a business. Making a business out of data is done by the companies as well as the market. There are other players in the industry that can derive a value from the data. Of course, things can move naturally, but to stimulate this, the PCFIR has to help us in deregulation, and there needs to be some fostering of the market to boost the growth of the industry. So instead of the industry that is naturally formed by the companies themselves, the government can kickstart this process by collaborating with the private sector. And I am learning as I go along, and this is helpful personally, and it is also beneficial to the company that I am part of.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Dong-gyu Lee. Hello, I am Lee Dong-gyu from Kakao Mobility. When I first joined the Fourth Industrial Revolution Committee, I was thinking about how companies are preparing for the Fourth Industrial Revolution and how companies can collaborate with the public sector for better results. That was my initial idea when I was joining this committee. But then the pandemic occurred, which was totally unprecedented and unexpected. And we had to deal with this imminent crisis. And I believe that this was all the more reason why there should be strong partnership between the public sector and the private sector. And when it comes to data, as you may know, K disease control has been quite successful thanks to the utilization of data, and also in formulating policies on the post-pandemic era, data has been quite useful. And I believe that the PCFIR has served an important role. When you think about the data policy of the government, the new project that we announced today is going to be quite crucial. I believe that this will provide a good opportunity to utilize data for the benefit of the people. Kakao Mobility has been utilizing big data, artificial intelligence, and autonomous driving. We are a company that provides such convenient services. As we're going through this pandemic, we have had many difficulties because of the limited mobility of people. And as such, there were many problems in the mobility industry yet last year. But recently, we have seen the recovery of mobility, and also there are new forms of mobility that people have been utilizing. And mobility as a service, or MaaS, has been emerging as an important element in collaboration with Korail and other public transport service providers. Now we have new models that are being developed and introduced, and there's a higher level of acceptance for these new mobility services. In this process, the government and the private sector have been working together to enhance better mobility for the people. The Korea Data 119 project includes very important and meaningful tasks and initiatives, and I hope that as a private sector member, I will do my part. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from the floor? Yes, please go ahead. Please state your name, affiliation, and country, please.
Hello, can you hear me? Is that okay? My name's Andrew Salmon from UK with Hong Kong-based media, Asia Times. For Mr. Lee with Kakao Mobility. Korea was the first country to commercialize a 5G network. You know, Korea has this now on a national basis, but we're not seeing, as far as I can tell, any, first mover innovations in either autonomous driving or in drone delivery services. If you have the networks in place and you have this excellent regulatory relationship, what is stopping Korea from being the leader in drones and autonomous driving? Thank you. And that question is also for Mr. Yoon, if he wishes to respond, of course.
제가 먼저 답변을 할까요?
Let me answer
사실 이제
first.
눈 당장 크게 우리가 볼 수 있는
As for the visible results and services that we can actually experience, they may not be there.
저희 회사 같은 경우에도 이미 자율주행
You can experience. As for my company, the commercial mobility services are provided in the city of Sejong. It takes some time to let the other people become aware. And for the results to be visible, we need some time. We have to accumulate data. And we need some time to be able to tell the people that they are beneficial. And then we could use more data sets to be able to make the analysis. And so Kakao Mobility is trying many new services related to autonomous driving. And as for drone delivery, in order to move toward that stage, there are some regulations and policies that the government has in place. And we need to and there are some small-scale projects. I don't know all the details. I think the government has them in the drawing board. And so the government will need to make the people more aware of the programs. Thank you. And now the chairperson, Yoon, will answer. Thank you for the question. Yes, that was quite a valid and an excellent question. The question was about autonomous driving and drone delivery, and as you rightly pointed out, yes, globally, Korea is not really visible in the autonomous driving and drone delivery scene yet. And looking at the reasons why, I think it's related to the reason of being for the presidential committee. As for autonomous driving and drone delivery, it does have impact on the public, and there were heavy government regulations. In my research lab, we are doing some research on drone control. The students would purchase a drone, and the Seoul National University is quite close to the mountain side, the Gwanak mountain, and you have to get an approval from the Seoul metropolitan government to fly the drone, and that takes a month, and that could cause some potential problems. So it's not a really research-friendly environment. And so there were such voices and complaints coming from the private sector. We need to make the investment in drones and autonomous driving. And so the government actually paid heed to the voices coming from the private sector, and thus was the birth of the Presidential Committee on the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And up until last year, I was a researcher at the university, and now I'm working with the government. Technological progress is very important, and to make that into a commercial business, it takes a lot of effort by many parties. And people say that Korea may be advanced in terms of deregulation, but as for autonomous driving and drone technology, we are up against many more regulations. And so the researchers, the companies will need more support so that they can overcome the regulations. Korea is making the effort. As for Hyundai Motors, it is developing and researching the areas of autonomous driving and drones, and you've probably read it in the press. And as for conferences overseas, we see the research is hot in the US, Canada, and the UK, and Korea follows in that pack. And so there are active efforts made by the public and the private sector, and we will see the synergy coming in the autonomous driving and drone technology that we have seen earlier in the semiconductor industry. I hope that will lead to good results. So in short, yes, we do agree that we are a bit behind. It could be because of technological reasons, but maybe from the legal and regulatory perspective. But now we have the Presidential Committee on the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and we're talking with the government, and we're overcoming such shortcomings. Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Please go ahead. Hello. I am Kim Mo-sun from Al Jazeera from Qatar. Thank you very much for your time. Of the points that you've mentioned, technology has been advancing rather quickly, but regulatory changes have not been taking place. But we do need to think about the ethical aspects. As we have advancement in AI and other technology, we need to think about the ethical aspects of such technology. For instance, we have chatbot services based on AI. They have been collecting data, and there were some issues in the process of collecting data through AI chatbot, and there were many questions raised and concerns as well. When you think about the announcement today, the government will be making sure that private companies, while they collect data, there will be data protection, because individuals may be concerned about data protection and data privacy, even though companies are saying that there will be de-identification and anonymization. Still, citizens may be worried about such possible ill use of data. In that sense, I believe that it would be very important to ensure the public that there will be data protection in place. So what are your plans and ideas about this? Going forward, there should be more efforts to accumulate a large amount of data. Last year, there was the U.S. presidential election, and there was a candidate who was arguing about securing a large pool of financial resources for basic income for individuals. And many IT companies have been collecting data for free, but they may soon have to impose certain fees on people, and it could be about data fee or data taxes. So I wonder if there was any discussion about this potential introduction of such programs. Thank you for your question. I believe that there are two questions. The first question is about the ethical aspect of AI and technology. So who would answer this question? Hello, I am Bang Myung-sun from SK Telecom. We have the AI assistant service called Nugu at SK Telecom. I was involved in developing the Nugu system for SK Telecom. When you think about artificial intelligence, I believe that this is still an evolving technology. Recently, there were some controversies regarding the chatbot service. This is not a mature service, but when you think about the characteristics of the AI chatbot service, it will continue to learn and evolve in its quality. In other words, this type of service will continue to evolve by collecting data and analyzing and learning from them. But when it comes to the ethical considerations, we do make such considerations from the very beginning of developing such technology. First of all, there are data protection guidelines that we need to follow, including anonymization or de-identification process. And secondly, we need to think about the nature of services. In the past, people would provide person-to-person interactions, and now AI will mimic such personal interactions, and the users may be tricked into believing that the other party is a person. So we have to be careful about this, and we have a set of guidelines that we're following in developing such services. But then once again, in the process of learning consumer data, there may be some controversies and issues, and that was illustrated in the recent controversy. But in the process of development and planning for services, and also after we launch new services, we will continue to improve such services. And we do have a framework in place to ensure that there will be full ethical considerations. And I hope that we will continue to improve our policies and procedures, and we will make sure that there will be no such problems of data protection or privacy. And this is something that all companies have to keep in mind. Thank you. Any other member of the panel? I'd like to add a little bit about AI ethics. At the end of last year, the Ministry of Science and ICT announced a basic policy, and we reviewed this policy announced by the ministry. Currently, in 25 countries around the world, they have been building and developing such guidelines for ethical use of AI. Likewise, in Korea, we want to foster the development of AI, but at the same time, we want to ensure that privacy and personal information will be well protected in the commercialization of AI technology. So we have announced a guideline on ethical consideration of AI, so I'd like to share that with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Additional questions? Can we now move on to the second question? Could you summarize once again your second question? In the process of collecting data, right now, the data is held for free. Please use the microphone. Thank you. What the U.S. claims is, in utilizing the data, the companies, large companies and the IT companies should pay the digital taxes. And what is the stance on the Korean government or the Korean companies? Well, we are having a talk in very many aspects, but as for the digital tax or data tax, there hasn't been any specific discussions yet. I think there are some relevant discussions, but we are not a political organization. We need to see that the consensus is built, and when the technology is ready, maybe we can talk about that taxation. Yes, I am aware of such discussions taking place worldwide, and I think countries are becoming ready technologically. Thank you. Next question, please.
마이크를 대고
Please use the microphone and tell us your affiliation and your name. Hello, I am Jae-won from Sungroh Times. Thank you for organizing this policy forum. My question is about the real aspect of putting in place the momentum for the presidential committee. How long will this committee continue to work, and what's the size of the budget, and how is this committee composed of? And now this question is to Mr. Yoon. You are a joint chairperson of the committee, but you're also a professor. Are you taking on these two jobs at the same time? What's your salary, and how much are you paid for this service? Well, that's quite an interesting and sparkling question. As for the driving force behind the presidential committee, this is indeed a frequently asked question, so I can comment on that. This organization is an advisory committee under the president's office, so we are not an enforcement body. So when you think about other ministries or agencies, they do have the execution power and they do have the enforcement power, but we are an advisory body, so we are serving as a think tank for the public and providing suggestions and advice to the government. But then our suggestions can be combined with government's commitment for execution. So starting from this year, we have expanded the organization. We used to have 5 ministers, but now we have ministers from 12 ministries as well as the prime minister. So the scope of the presidential committee has been expanded. It is because the fourth industrial revolution is relevant to many different government agencies. It is a pan-government topic, and it is also a way to improve our effectiveness and influence. So starting from this year, we are carrying out the Korea Data 119 project and many initiatives, and these have been quite effective. This presidential committee was formed in 2017. I am the second joint chairperson. The first chairperson served 2 terms until last year of February 14th, and I was appointed as the second joint chairperson on February 14th of last year. When this government administration ends its term, our presidential committee may expire, but when there is social consensus as national consensus for the need to have such a committee, I believe that a similar organization can be established in continuation. There are many discussions and proposals about creating a new organization such as data agency or data authority. So there may be a similar ministry or even a government agency for the next administration. And as for the budget and other questions, I am not in charge of practical issues, so I would have to answer this question later. So we have about 19 to 20 civilian members of the committee. And so we have 3 people here, and we have 16 more, and we have 12 ministers and the prime minister. So I would say if you do the simple math, you can find out the size of the organization. The staff members and the members of the presidential committee have almost doubled since last year. I am having a multiple job. I'm a professor and also serving as the chairperson of the PC Presidential Committee. So I spend 2 days of my week for the Presidential Committee, but I am not compensated for this role, so there's no salary for this. But I've received a lot of support and assistance from the government. And as a student back then, I was able to work in a small company for 3 years in place of military service, and I also got some government funding for overseas study. So I got a lot of benefit from the government budget, and it is my turn to pay back to society and pay back to the government by serving in this presidential committee. I hope my role is helpful. I hope this has answered your questions. Thank you.
The reason why I asked about the salary is, of course, not only numerically, but it shows how realistically the government is seriously thinking about the presidential committee and what is it trying to gain from the committee. But you're not paid, and there seems to be no clear-cut mission. So it seems like a slogan, an empty slogan, going with the fashion, the trend. So in order to have some realistic power, you should be paid. And the organization should have a clear R&R. Then it can be taken more seriously. What do you think about that? Thank you for making this discussion very active. Yes, you may feel that way. I know where you're coming from. As for the Presidential Committee on the Fourth Industrial Revolution, I think if you looked further, there would be no misunderstanding coming from your end. It's not like a regular commission or a committee. I did have a similar talk earlier with somebody else. This is a presidential committee, and it's quite an active one at that. And I'm not just saying this. And if this is a slogan, then I would be pleasantly surprised. So it's not just words. We are doing something quite concrete. So if you looked into it, you would learn that we are doing something realistic and feasible. And yes, we are getting a lot of work done. More specifically, for the last 3+ years, we have been deliberating on and reviewing and approving relevant policies. We have coordinated different government positions, and we have resolved conflicts coming from the private sector, and we were a good communication channel between the public and the private sectors. So I can say for sure that we are not an organization just for slogan's sake. And as for not getting paid, and maybe that would discourage me from putting my time and effort into it, but it is a ministerial position, but I am 10 years junior compared to the other ministers. And I think the government tried to make this a young organization, and it wanted to embrace the young energy from the private sector. And if that is combined with the execution power from the government, that would produce synergy. It's like writing a paper in the university. What I can contribute is provide new ideas, come up with something innovative that the government could not think of, add a twist to the government policies, add a fresh perspective. Yes, thank you. Thank you for taking a picture. Yes, so looking at it from that side, by design, that's what the Presidential Committee on the Fourth Industrial Revolution is for. Yes, we have dedicated resources working alongside with me, and my role is to deliver the voice of the private sector and to participate in the decision-making process representing the general public. Then I would instead have to pay the government to be in the role.
Thank you. Chairperson Yoon mentioned that there are 13 members from the public sector and 20 members from the private sector. And also there are subcommittees. Would you like to add on that? There's a special subcommittee on data. Mr. Yoon, would you like to add some more comments about this special subcommittee? Until last year, we had 2 special subcommittees. One was a subcommittee on digital healthcare. So this subcommittee is concerned with digital and medical records, how we can protect healthcare data while utilizing them. And the other subcommittee is on smart city that includes innovations such as autonomous driving and drones. And this year, as I mentioned briefly, the Presidential Committee has been expanded. As a main thrust, we created the Special Committee on Data. Mr. Pae came up with a presentation on the Korea Data 119 project. The subcommittee on data is going to be in charge of the 119 project. So once again, there are 3 subcommittees. Any other questions? Please go ahead.
Hello, my name is Morten Larsen from Denmark. I'm a freelance journalist. I'd like to jump back to the AI ethical question, because in Korea we see AI being used anywhere between K-pop and the military. So it's an incredibly broad field that's being used with deepfakes, Iruda, chatbots, and everything. So I'm just wondering, how do you set guidelines for a field that can be used at anything from military purposes to entertainment purposes?
네, 제가 답을 드리는 게 좋을 것 같습니다. 역시
Let me
굉장히 좋은
try to
질문을
answer this
하셨고요.
question. This is a very good question.
우리가 사용하려면
Whenever we think about using AI, we also have to think about adverse and potential negative consequences of using AI. There could be Iruda or deepfake or Microsoft issues. So there can be a lot of issues that may arise in the use of AI. So this is a very crucial question, and this is something that we need to address in order to promote the use of AI. At the end of last year, as I briefly mentioned, there was an AI ethical guideline announced by the Ministry of Science and ICT, but this is not a law that has enforcement power, but this is a guideline that should be used by researchers and developers, because we do not want to impose on any additional regulation, but this is a guideline, and you can see similar actions taken in other countries around the world. For instance, recently, there was an issue of using the AI for military purposes at a university, and there is use of AI in the entertainment. When you think about guidelines for the military sector versus guidelines for the entertainment sector, they need to be different. They are different. But what I mentioned by the guideline announced by the ministry last year is a generic guideline. Now, moving on to specific sectors, including entertainment and military, we first have to have an overarching guideline. So that was announced last year, and I believe that there will be more specific guidelines for individual sectors coming out in the future. But the security aspect and the military aspect may be quite sensitive, so I'm not fully aware of that. In the private sector, we do have a generic guideline that provides an overarching direction, and going forward in the future, we will have some more specific guidelines coming for individual sectors. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Please go ahead.
Interesting that you mentioned that the committee also works like a think tank of the public. It's a kind of follow-up question. The fourth industrial revolution, including AI, will have an enormous impact on the labor market here in Korea. Is that something, a topic that you also discuss within the committee? And what's your idea on this, on the future of the labor market? In some areas, this labor will, or workplaces will be becoming totally redundant. What areas do you think, in which areas do you think that AI and digitalization in general will have the most impact? And another follow-up question to Sungroh Times. In 1 year, there will be presidential elections, and there is the risk that the committee will be scrapped, or do you think that will work on? Thank you.
네, 독일 DPA 기자님께서 AI의 일자리 문제.
Yes, the question was about the AI and its impact on the labor market. Would you like to address this, Mr. Yoon? Thank you for the question. Yes, it is included in the FAQs. Many people are quite interested in the impact on the labor market. With the introduction of new technologies, well, they may not be so new anymore. There has been technological revolutions and evolutions on the way, and we are packaging it in as fourth industrial revolution. And so we have had the impacts coming from the new technologies on the society. But as for AI, compared to the steam engine or the electricity, it is trying to replace the human intelligence. The essence of Homo sapiens is thinking, and AI could replace people. And so the concern has become more imminent and urgent, and people are more concerned. Can AI replace human labor? We could divide it into a short-term and a long-term impact. In the short term, no. In the immediate future, AI cannot replace human labor, maybe for dangerous and time-consuming routine work that people want to avoid. We could utilize AI as a useful tool. I am not really good with calculation, so I use the calculator. So if there's something messy and dirty and difficult that I don't want to do, we could use AI instead. But in the long term, general intelligence and AI, if it evolves into hardware robots, and if we have that kind of technology maturation, we could have robots that think like humans, then I think we can have a greater impact on the labor market. As an AI researcher and as the chairperson of the Fourth Industrial Revolution Committee, it has relevance to the labor market. The basic stance is we have to first study the impact of the new technologies on every aspect of our lives. And representing the labor sector, we have the Minister of Labor and Employment. And there are studies continuously taking place on the impact of AI and new technology on the labor market. And since we have the Minister of Labor and Employment on the board with us, we continue to have this talk. And in terms of technology, including Korea, many advanced nations are becoming an aging society. Japan and Korea are prime examples. In other words, the labor force is decreasing with the aging population. We could use AI to compensate for the shortage of manpower, and that was the recommendation from the OECD. We include this so that we can have a healthy balance or compensation of shortage of labor market in the AI. In order for a bird to fly, it has to flap both its wings. And so AI and labor market could be it's not the accelerator and the brake in a car, because the two components have different functions. But AI and labor market are like the two wings of a bird. It's to get ahead and it's to live a better life. So I make the analogy to the bird's wings, and we need both, and we need harmony. And which sector will be impacted the most by AI? I think the civilian members of the committee will be in a better place to answer that question. What will be the impact most heavily hit or impacted by the AI? And as to the second question, with the presidential election coming up next year, and will this be a sustainable organization? The reason why this presidential committee was formed was because of the private sector. They were complaining there were heavy regulations in autonomous driving and drone technology. As long as there is demand from the private sector, hopefully there will continue to be a similar organization. Next year and even after that, I think we will be here for long. And I'd like to ask the other members to answer the first question.
Let me try to answer this question. Which sectors would be most impacted by AI? At SK Telecom, this is also a big question that we've been pondering upon. Of many things that we perform, if there are repetitive and routine works, as was mentioned by Chairperson Yoon, I believe that such repetitive works that people want to avoid can be replaced by AI. Indeed, within our company, we call this the job eraser. So some of the simple and repetitive works can be replaced by AI, and works that are dangerous or works that people don't want to take on can be performed by AI. And by utilizing the data that we accumulate in this process, we can use AI for works that require some level of intelligence. So within the company, we try to use AI for repetitive works, and also in areas where we need to make use of multiple sources of data, AI can complement human employees so that we can perform better. And in the long term, there can be yes to AI replacing a lot of human jobs, but in the long term, I believe that there will be new jobs that will be created as well. As for myself, I am providing a mobility service as a software at Kakao Mobility Corp. So we are considering this topic very seriously, and I agree with what Ms. Park mentioned. When you think about AI being combined with hardware, then the hardware that is equipped with AI can replace human jobs that are dangerous and are of low wage. So that is one potential impact of AI on the labor market. And when AI becomes a more sophisticated AI algorithm as software, then it can perform works that used to be performed by highly educated people. In other words, AI and digital transformation will have impact on many sectors in the labor market in the long run, but at the same time, the government will have to work with the private sector in developing better training and education and how we can address people who may lose jobs because of AI and digital technology. So that's what I can say. Thank you. In my view, all of you may be very interested in the impact of AI on the labor market. This is quite a sensitive issue, so I need to be rather careful in making my remarks. There may be jobs that are replaced by AI, but there are areas where AI will be used to improve the quality of services rather than simply replacing the existing jobs. I am working in the fintech industry. When you think about the number of people working in the financial industry as a whole, I do not have the exact number, but it could be 100,000 people. But tens of millions of people are using the financial services. I'm not saying that the fintech technology and the fintech companies will replace the traditional financial institutions at all, but it's not the concept of replacement, but in the past, people would pay higher fees because of inefficiency in the financial industry. They used to pay 1% or 2% as fees, but with fintech solution, they can now pay lower fees. Likewise, as AI develops and such technology is applied, I believe that it will benefit a lot of people rather than having impact on the labor market in itself as a form of replacement. So I do not think that we should be worried too much about the potential replacement of jobs by AI, but there may be a lot of more benefits. If AI or technology is to have huge impact on the labor market, it will take a lot of time. So it is a long-term potential. We still have time to prepare for such impact with policy improvements and other regulations and programs. Thank you.
Thank you. In the interest of time, we will entertain one final question we received online. It's from a Russian journalist. I have a question for Mr. Bae, NTS, NHIS. Is the data only shared for the Korean companies or Google, Amazon, Facebook? Are they also shared to the multinational companies? The companies may provide services to the Korean companies, but if you don't have a Korean office presence, can these companies also share data? As for the data that has been mentioned, it includes personal data and trade secrets, so they were not shared and made public. And we are not saying that we will open all types of data to all the public. It will be on a selective basis. For example, the NTS has business registration data. They will provide services to certify whether the information is correct or not. And as for medical data, you have to get the individual's consent and provide my data. And as for financial data, it will be de-identified and provided. And if needed, the data safety zone will be the only area in which the data can be processed, and you can just get the outcome of the processed data. And as for the usage of data, only in certain cases when the data is used for certain purposes, then that data will be shared. In the interest of time, we will conclude the Q&A, and if you have further questions, please email COSIS and we'll get back to you with the answers. And we will have the Chairperson Yoon deliver his final comments. I will make my comments brief. I would like to thank the journalists for attending the policy forum and asking very relevant questions. In Korea, there will be more efforts made to promote the fourth industrial revolution. Please pay more attention to this matter. Thank you once again. Thank you very much. With this, we would like to conclude the FPC Korea Policy Forum with the Presidential Committee's chairperson. I would like to thank the journalists and all the participants for your time. Thank you.